All right, so welcome to the Marshfield Zoning Board of Appeals meeting, Tuesday, February 11th, 2025. This is a hybrid meeting. If you're dialing in, please use *6 to mute and unmute yourself. And we are being recorded by MCTV, if anyone's interested. I'm going to do a roll call since we have several members online.
Larry Keane here.
Brian Murphy present.
Jean Lee here.
Mac Brothers present.
Brian, you there?
Brian's not on yet.
Oh, he's not. He said he was. It's in the wrong meeting.
I heard Heidi.
I heard Heidi.
Yeah, Heidi is here.
Oh, yeah. Do you see him now, Andrew? I don't see him. Yeah, we're just waiting for Brian still, right?
What? Oh, is it? Oh, good. I'll tell Michael.
Hey, you having technical problems? We can't see you on there. Yeah. Oh, Patrick Brennan just came on. I see. All right. All right, okay, thanks. All right, he's gonna try again, so. We have 2510 Junior Dry Seal Trust. Coming up for that.
Is Mr. Sullivan?
Oh, yeah, he's on, I think he should be on there. Do you see him on there?
I don't see him.
I don't see him, and I need a supermajority.
Well, 1, 2, 3, 4. We have Grover, too. We have 5.
We can go.
What's that?
I said, then we can go.
Yeah. I don't see him on there yet. But, in accordance with 305, 10.09 of the Marshfield Municipal Code, the petitioner is seeking an appeal of the building commissioner's zoning determination dated December 5th, 2024, that the premises is located in a tidal marshland pursuant to the coastal wetlands overlay district, that the premises is being used to store junk as defined in the Marshfield Municipal Code, and that the illegal filling of a portion of the premises in or about 1977-78 was done without permitting or variance on the property located at 605 Plymouth Ave, which is further identified on the assessor maps as being on parcel K10 1909, is located in the B3 and inland wetland zoning district. Go ahead.
All set?
Yep.
James F. Creed Jr. representing the appellant, Danny Jr. Dry Seal Trust. At the outset, I'd like to state that in the presentation, the written presentation that we presented, we stated that the land was in the coastal wetlands district. That apparently is incorrect. I submitted today snapshots of the zoning map, the official zoning map from the ZBA website, and the entirety of the land is in the inland wetlands district, not the coastal wetlands district, and there's no coastal wetlands district anywhere close to this land. The first analysis of the building commissioner's determination has to do with the 1969 soil survey, which is pulled into the coastal wetlands district definitions. However, it's apparent from what we read in the building commissioner's determination that he relied solely on the mapping of that soil survey from 1969, as opposed to the entirety of the survey itself. The survey indicates in its definitional portion of a tidal marsh that the land to be considered a tidal marsh has to be subject to tidal action every 12 and a half hours. That concept is incorporated into the bylaw in different language, but in essence the same thing, that tidal action has to overtake that land twice a day. Since the installation of the dike in Green Harbor, which altered the tidal flow of the Green Harbor River, none of this land has been subject to tidal action and therefore is not tidal marsh as defined in the 69 soil survey. So whether or not you consider it coastal wetland or inland wetland, it doesn't meet that second phase of the definition, which is that it's subject to tidal action every 12 and a half hours. Moreover, if you look at the zoning map, the B3 page of that zoning map, you'll see that there is a water body that runs along the length of the westerly boundary of the property. I'll wait for it. There we go. So it's that starting at the PL, which is property line, and running to where the arrow points to B3. To steal the line from Prometheus, God doesn't work in straight lines. That is a drainage ditch, and it's a drainage ditch that drains into Bass Creek, which is at the PL end of that line. In fact, the town, within the last couple of years, did work there at the corner of Ocean and Plymouth on that drainage, and it drains further up into beyond Kearsarge Road and beyond in Wrexham. So, in order to be considered tidal marsh, the land has to be underwater twice a day. It's not. It's common sense, it's logic. You can go out there, the reality of the situation is that that land does not flood. The drainage ditch does not flood. There is no regular tidal action that affects this land whatsoever, and it hasn't since 1872. With regard to junk, the determination by the building commissioner that the lot is full of junk. The property that's at this premises is not considered junk because it is paid for to be parked at this commercial parking lot by the owners of those vehicles and those boats. So it doesn't meet the definition of items that are about to be disposed or discarded. So there is no junk on the premises. One may not consider some of the items valuable, but the persons who are renting space to put those items there certainly consider those items to have value. With regard to the illegal filling of land, which occurred in 1975, one thing you should be aware of is that this filling was not for the entirety of that lot. It was only the southerly end of that lot that was filled by Mr. Phillips in 1975. He did that, my recollection, although I was only a junior in high school at the time.
1975?
1975.
You said 18.
Oh, sorry, 1975. Yeah, 1875, there wouldn't be any school buses. Would have been a neat trick by Mr. Phillips if he could have done that in 1875.
But the dike was there.
Yes, correct. So My recollection is that Mr. Phillips had acquired additional bus routes and needed additional space on the existing paved parking lot. So he illegally filled and paved over the portion that he filled. Subsequently, an order of conditions issued. I know that town council mentioned a special permit that was denied. I called the ZBA today, I talked with Nancy, couldn't get a copy of that. I suspect that what Mr. Phillips may have tried to do is legitimize the filling. I'll take council's word that it was denied. For purposes of this hearing, it really makes no difference. It's not subject to an enforcement action, and since the filling occurred in '75 and at the latest 1978, in excess of 10 years has passed, and no enforcement action has been taken against the filled land. The filled land also didn't change the nature of the soil conditions. The soil conditions are what they are. I've submitted to you the updated soil survey from 2022. Marshfield's one of only 6 or 7 towns that have been updated by the USDA. And in that submittal, you'll see that this land is considered Category 603A, urban land wet substratum, meaning that it's been altered by man and is basically industrial land. It's a commercial parking lot. And it always has been used as a commercial parking lot with the parking structure underneath it. And what I mean by that is that the land was paved, and paving meets the definition of structure in the zoning bylaw. Citing to, and I've given you the citation to Chapter 40A, Section 7, with regard to the statute of limitations for going after such an enforcement action. A structure that was built without a building permit or was otherwise in violation of the zoning bylaw or any other ordinances of the town. Citing to a quote from the case that town council cited to, Bruno versus Tisbury, which is an appeals court case. In that case, specifically citing to 48 Section 7 and the 10-year statute of limitations for a violation of the zoning bylaw, ordinances, or any other bylaws that was not done without permitting. The court stated, in contrast, the 10-year statute of limitations does not depend on the issuance of a building permit. It bars actions intended to compel the removal, alteration, or relocation of any structure on the basis of a zoning violation after 10 years, regardless of how the structure came to be. It's our position, and I think it clear, that when you build a parking lot by pouring asphalt and grading it, you've created a structure. And under the zoning bylaw, which dovetails with the building code, a combination of materials assembled at a fixed location to give support or shelter, including but not limited to a building, bridge, trestle, tower, framework, retaining wall, tank, tunnel, tent, stadium, reviewing stand, platform, bin, fence, sign, flagpole, windmill, solar devices, or the like. A parking lot, a commercial parking lot in this case, is or the like. With regard to the allegation that this is a bus parking lot and it's changed to a commercial parking lot, the zoning bylaw doesn't have a use item for bus parking lot. The only use item that appears in the zoning bylaw is commercial parking lot, and it's permitted in the inland wetland district. That's the presentation.
Bob, do you want to?
It's appropriate to hear from Andrew Stewart. It's
Oh.
his enforcement order, so you should hear from him.
Andrew, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, pretty much, I've already stated, everything in the letter and in the, notes that I gave to the board prior. As far as the determination of whether or not it's in the coastal wetlands district, I do disagree with, Attorney Creed. Based on the definition of the district, it clearly says that it's based on the July 1969 soil survey. We have not updated that since it was done, because we wanted to keep the integrity of the coastal wetlands district. The inland wetlands district was updated using this updated survey. We now use that map for the inland wetlands district, but we never incorporated it as part of the coastal wetlands district. We kept it as the 1969 Soil Conservation Service survey. So that's basically the way I have to identify it is based on that map and that map alone. It doesn't matter whether or not it's, if we feel visibly it's not tidal marsh, it's what was determined in that map. So I'm just going by the strict letter of the language here of this, of the bylaw. And then I would agree with Attorney Creed that the zoning map shows it as being inland wetlands district. I don't know why that was done. I know the zoning map was updated, I think, I want to say like 2018 or 2016 or something like that. But I wasn't here at that time and I don't remember, I don't know why the coastal wetlands district wasn't represented accurately on that map. But if you're going by the letter of the bylaw, it's a go by this one. So that's essentially it. Like I said, I don't have, I work very well with data, quite honestly. But I do receive a lot of complaints about it. And he has emailed me and he's, said he's gonna make some efforts to clean it up, for what it's worth. But that's, kind of where I'm at with it.
Okay, thanks, Andrew. Bob, do you have anything?
I gave you my memo. I think Attorney Creed and I may disagree on some of the underlying facts and the law. I think Andrew's decision is correct. I think that the property was legally filled. That's not Mr. Junior's problem. He didn't do it. I don't think there's any allegation that he did do it, and the town appears to have tolerated it for many years from a zoning perspective, but this is not a structure. That's not a proper interpretation of the bylaw. If you look at the definition of structure in the bylaw, none of the language would cause you to believe pavement is. Our conservation bylaw actually treats asphalt as a structure, but our zoning bylaw does not. This property apparently was located in the coastal wetlands district on the 1969 map, and it appears to be still in that district, if that's the map. Attorney Creed and I disagree on the statute of limitations, because the statute of limitations that he's citing is relating to structures, and it's not relating to uses. There is no statute of limitations on our authorized uses. There was some mention of some prior litigation. There was a litigation by Dana Jr. some years ago with the Conservation Commission. He was seeking to void a order of conditions that had been registered against the property. Case was litigated and decided against Mr. Jr., so the order of conditions was construed to be a conservation restriction, precluding any structures or any buildings from being constructed on the lot. The issue of junk is an issue of fact for you all to decide, not up to me, it's up to Andrew to decide, but it's up to you all to decide whether Andrew's decision is correct. It's any worn out, cast off, discarded articles or materials which are ready for destruction or disposal, or have been collected or stored for salvage or conversion to some other use. Hopefully you've been out and taken a look at it. I think you have to decide for yourself whether the cars or boats there are junk or not. I mean, I think there's such a thing as a junk car or junk boat. I don't know how long some of these have been there. So again, that's really up to you all to decide. I don't know what happened in 1871. I don't know whether this land flooded, but Bass Creek is a tidal creek that is dependent on the ocean. It may be regulated by the dike, but it's still considered a tidal creek, and it is cleaned from time to time by the town and the DPW, because the water will stagnate in that area, but it does go up and down. So your decision is whether to uphold Andrew's decision, to overturn his decision, or to do it in whole or in part, and I gave you 3 proposed motions, and the board is free to do whatever you think you ought to here.
Hey, Larry, you ready?
Well, it appears I think we have quite a few moving parts here. We should probably take it one at a time. Wasn't this in front of this board for the storage of the boats and cars and junk just a few years ago?
Yes.
And there was a determination that,
I don't think we ever got a determination. I don't think we ever got answers back we were looking for, did we?
I don't believe you did.
No, we never had a
The
determination.
issue of enforcement was left to another day.
That's what we did.
so he was allowed to continue on with what he was doing at that point? Is that what the
No.
outcome was?
You didn't make any
We
determination
didn't.
on the enforcement issue.
Okay.
We never
I think
decided.
as you left it, there might have been a filing that was envisioned that Mr. Junior would make to your board regarding this, and then there wasn't.
Yeah,
And my understanding from Andrew was that some type of a redevelopment plan, which I haven't seen, was submitted, and that's what triggered Andrew's enforcement letter.
yeah. So I remember the conversation about wanting to keep it within inside the fence, and all the storage of whatnot was to be kept inside the fence, or they wanted inside the fence. Just seems like we have a lot, we're going back 50 years here. We're going back to the mid-'70s for a variant situation, a filling situation. And the lot clearly needs to be cleaned up. I'd like to see something come out of this where we come to a finalization where a determination is finally made for everybody, for the town and for Dana Jr. You know, I'm not, it's been a storage lot for as long as I can remember.
How do you feel, Gene? Anything, or?
I think it's junk.
Yeah.
I don't,
What-
to me, it doesn't look like storage. It looks like junk. I don't appreciate, if he's supposed to put it behind a fence, I don't see it being kept behind a fence. I think he could do a better job at it. That's my opinion, just from the get-go. I don't, about the soil thing, it goes way back, so I have to really think about that.
Pardon me, real quick, is there a long-term plan for this property? Does,
The genesis of our being here tonight started with Mr. Junior approaching a conservation commission, which expressed that they might be willing to reconsider what they had previously approved, which was a 2-unit residential development of this lot. The reason that never went forward after it was approved by the Conservation Commission was it wasn't financially feasible at 2. Dana needed a 3rd unit in order to go forward. But the Conservation Commission, or its agent, indicated that they wanted to know what zoning would do, or what zoning's position was.
Yeah.
That's what led to Dana approaching the building commissioner and his enforcement order, and we're here tonight.
From my perspective, I thought I'd gotten my head around this issue, and that what you were, in your written report, were saying to us is that, yes, it's in a coastal wetlands overlay district, but it shouldn't be. That's kind of what I was just, I like to boil things down to make it simple. But in your presentation tonight, you said, you changed. You said it's not in the coastal wetlands overlay district. So to me, that was a change that I have to get my head around a bit. From what I read from you and from what I've heard from you.
The change was based on a review, which I probably should have done at the beginning, but the change is based on the zoning map, the official zoning map of the town of Marshfield, which indicates that the entirety of this land and all of the land around it, which, by the way, is fully developed, is inland wetland, not coastal wetland. There isn't coastal wetland identified on the zoning map anywhere near this land. And the reason for that, in my opinion, respectfully, is that it's not coastal wetland. It does not meet that definition. The map, the 69 soil survey map is not a coastal wetland map. It's not a zoning map. It's a soil survey map. So if you think about it this way, prior to 1872, all that land was subject to tidal action. It flooded twice a day. So the soils reflect tidal marsh, or that it's tidally influenced land. Once the dike was installed, that flooding stopped.
And yet, almost
and-
100 years later, it was still, from a soil perspective, viewed as.
Well, soils don't change. I mean, you can't change the underlying nature of soil in 100 years. Maybe in 1,000 years, it'll be something different. But today, it's the same type of soil that it would be. But it's a two-part analysis. And that's why I submitted to you
the
the written portion of the soil survey, which,
That I got. So that like I said, to me, it says, you admit it, you not admit it. You said that, yes, while the premises are located within the Coastal Wetlands Overlay District, but then you are arguing that they shouldn't have been. I get that. That's actually an argument that I can get my head around. Second part is the whole idea of junk. I did a tour of the property. I just drove through, looked at it, and there is junk there. There's furniture, there's disused power tools, there are industrial bits and pieces. I don't know anything about boats, so I don't know if it's a good boat or a junk boat, or nor do I really care. There are a lot of cars or a lot of trucks, some who don't have inspection stickers, don't have plates. The ones that do have plates, most of them are not current. So they've been there a long time, whether they run or not. Is that junk or not? It's hard for me to tell. I don't know, but I do know that there's a lot of detritus in that area that would be a hazard should that flood and create projectiles and potentially do damage. So there is some junk, whether it's the stuff that's parked there or the stuff that is stuffed underneath and on top of and around the big vehicles and boats that are there. Number one. Number two. Number three, on the last, which was the illegal filling of land. To me, the issue is paving a structure. That's, to me, that's what this boils down to. If it's not, then Bob is right. If it is, then we have to get our heads around it.
Brian, do you have anything to add?
Well, I applaud Attorney Creed for his creative approach, arguing that pavement is a structure. That's a first for me. There would create an extraordinary number of non-conforming structures throughout the town of Marshfield. Were that the case, I am I appreciate his creativity. However, I disagree that pavement is a structure. From my perspective, through no fault of the applicant, this lot was filled extrajudicially, and he acquired it, according to the assessors, for what does not appear to be an arm's length transaction. It was for a relatively nominal sum of money a number of years ago. So my guess is he knew that he was buying something that he was, essentially assuming the difficulties that the previous owner had with the property. And it's not as though he paid $1 million for $1 million piece of land. Obviously there's the stuff that's on there. I'm reminded of the judge when asked the definition of pornography. I think it was Justice Stewart said it's kind of hard to define it, but I know it when I see it. I've been by the property, and to me, there are several items of substantial value on the property, but there is also an extraordinary amount of junk. And if this were next to me, I wouldn't be too happy, and I'd want the junk cleaned up. And I respect Mac's position that he's not sure about the value of boats. you know, there are plenty of old sayings about the two best days in a boat owner's life, but it seems to be a lot of boat owners have left their headaches with the applicant. So, yeah, at the end of the day, my conclusion is that that Andrew made the right call, and my vote would be to uphold Andrew's decision.
Okay. So I'm gonna move that we close, anything from the audience on this?
Yeah, right here.
Go ahead. Name and address, come up to the podium, please.
Brian Jordan, 944 Ocean Street. Just to make clear, the whole discussion, we're trying to get him to clean up the so-called junk. Is that what we're trying to do? I live right across the street. It doesn't bother me. I've never complained about it. I'm more concerned about the junk that's collecting behind the liquor store. They've parking boats and trucks now, and one of the truck, the windows aren't even shut. The snow and the rain goes in it. So, I mean,
And that's beyond our scope, but if you'd like to make a complaint to the building.
no, I don't, as I said, it doesn't bother me. If there's something bothers me, I've talked to Dana over the years. It's been there for over 20 years, and but I mean, he has cleaned it up a couple times. If it's a matter of the stuff outside the fence that's starting to collect, put it inside. I don't understand it. I didn't understand because of so many, like they said, there's so many things that are involved in this about the pavement and everything else. But it doesn't. I'd like to see houses. I'd like to see houses. If we're going to make them clean up the junk, let them put up some houses. That's all.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
Yes, Dana wants to speak, but I just really quick do want to say that there is an active violation against them across the street too for non-compliant lighting. They have this spot lighting that goes out into the street, and they are storing boats and vehicles back there in violation as well. So they have been issued those violations as well.
Thank you, Andrew. Go ahead.
Thank you. Dana Jr., 26 Idaho Street, I'm the owner of the premises. As far as junk or not junk, I am working on getting more things out of there, and the things that are stuffed under the boats, things like that. I have been working on it. Sometimes it accumulates again, and I have to do it again. And I'm not entirely in control of that when people are coming and going. But I can say that some of the things there that look like junk. I mean, I have a woman. She parks her deceased husband's truck there. She pays faithfully every month, and she does not want me to touch that truck. I go, why don't you just junk the truck? It looks like a junk truck. She goes, here's my money every month for 5 years now. So there are things like that that I'm sure people would say some things are junk. I agree, and I'm working on those things. And other things that you might say is junk that is somebody else's treasure. So most people continue to pay, even if it looks like junk, to somebody else. As far as the plan for the overall property and the use and all that, how this came about is that I asked the building inspector for his own determination on the buildability, because I wanted to go back to conservation, which I went there 2 or 3 years ago, and they did, they were open, and they did approve and give me an order of conditions in order to build houses on it. During that time, it was a tumultuous time that land prices weren't what they are now, and COVID happened, the orders ran out. So I'm in a position now where I wanted to go back and say, can we work this out again? That's what brought me to the zoning. They said, well, go check with zoning. My impression was that they might be open to it. So they said, go check out the zoning. That's what brings me to this. It was to my surprise that he would say it's in the coastal wetlands district when, and I understand about the 1969 soil survey, but based on the zoning map, which is the first stop certainly for me and for most people, the coastal wetlands is not part of this. This is not part of the coastal wetlands, it's part of the inland wetlands. And when I went to conservation a few years ago, they didn't say anything about coastal wetlands or anything like that. I know those are two separate issues as far as conservation and zoning, but I would think that conservation certainly has a bearing on if there's coastal wetlands, they're not gonna be too open to letting me build houses there. And they were a few years ago, and I think they might be again. So as far as the soil mapping, again, that has been updated, and I see that in the file there, so you can review that. I think it's a rather large issue to contend that it's in the coastal wetlands district when it does not flood every 12 and a half hours. And I've had it for about 20 years now, and it has never flooded since I've had it. Well, really one time, I think. So I just wanted to mention those things. The biggest thing to me is the zoning map. Apparently, we cannot trust the zoning map for our usage because it completely contradicts what the zoning determination was. And I have great issue with that. If I can't go to the, if a landowner can't go to the zoning map and trust it, why do we have it? I think it should be, I mean, if it's gonna go like this, it should be at least updated and let people contend, you know, go against it and speak up against it. But the way it is right now, it's an inland wetland. There's only one piece of information that says it's a coastal wetland, and that's the 69 map that has been since updated. All the other pieces of information show that it's an inland wetland, including from conservation, who does say that this is a redevelopment, and who does say that the parking lot is a structure. I've been through several developments where I wanted to put down pavement, and they say, nope, you're too close. You're too close to the wetlands. You have to either leave it a dirt road, or you have to just use gravel. You cannot pave it, because pavement is a structure. And again, I know they have their rules, and zoning has their rules, but it doesn't seem to make sense to me. So in the end of the day, what I want to try to achieve here is to get it buildable, go to conservation. Again, they were open to it a couple years ago. I'm hoping they'll be open to it again. I think they will be. And end up building houses there, in which case all of the pavement is gone, all of the boats are gone, all of the junk is gone, everything's gone, and that would be better for the community. Be better for me, I think better for you, better for the neighbors, and there would be a few houses there. That's my end goal in doing this. So I'm hoping that I can get at least 4 out of 5 of you to agree with that, so that I can move along and get everything out, because the only, if I don't make it buildable, if it's not buildable, my only use is that commercial parking lot. And it's gonna continue to be the use that it is, as it has for the last 20 years. The same thing, just keeps on going. I guess I'm looking at it like Gaza, right? Anyway, thank you. That's all.
So Bob, would that continued use continue?
It's not, Andrew's determined it's not a lawful use.
All right.
So us agreeing with Andrew's determination here would strip that property of its current use. Everything would have to be removed, the boats, the junk,
He
the
would be
cars.
affirming that the use was never properly permitted with your board.
But that would be the end result. Everything there would have to go, would be an empty lot at this point.
To use it that way, you'd have to grant a variance.
And we'd need a variance to keep it going the way it is.
And what do
Yeah,
we do?
Okay, you guys ready to,
Yeah, I just
Anything
don't
else?
see
So-
the benefit in,
what?
Is JJ on? Did you ask him?
No,
if
no,
he had any-
he had to leave, so Brian's gonna.
So what do we do about these 78 orders of condition that were attached?
The 78 orders of conditions act as a permanent conservation restriction, preventing any buildings from being constructed on the entirety of the property.
So building anything is a moot point.
No, but Attorney Creed is right. The Conservation Commission, acting only as conservation, said that if he agreed to limit it to 2 houses, he removed some of the fill and put a permanent conservation restriction on the remainder and restored some of the area by Bass Creek, they would be willing to accept allowing the fill that remained there and conceptually 2 homes. But that had nothing to do with zoning. And then that plan was abandoned because I guess it wasn't economic.
And now it's 3 houses, if he wants to do that.
It was at the time
At
that you
that
needed a
time.
3rd unit for it to make sense.
And now, if he wants to go forward, does he want to put 3 houses there?
Haven't gotten that far yet. We're at this stage as opposed to, so the concept hasn't evolved far enough to let you know how many units would be necessary for Dana to go forward. Dana can chime in if he has a number. I don't know about the number.
Brian, can I say something here real quick?
Sure.
The way I look at it really is, yeah, they basically, you know, you can uphold or deny the appeal and uphold the determination, and then, you know, encourage them to get a variance to do something, right? On the property in order to be developed, to be developed, you know, there could be an argument there to be made. Or even a variance to continue the current use as a non-compliant use, given there are conditions that go along with it, site plan approval and all of that. So I think those are the kind of the options they have.
So would you like to come back?
Beyond like overturning the decision and granting the appeal.
Would you like to come back with a variance, or do you want us to decide this tonight?
It's a Dana call.
Yeah.
Did you hear that, Dana?
Yes, I don't understand what I would be varying from, as a commercial parking lot is a permitted use in the B3 zone. What would I want a variance from?
If they uphold the determination that it's in the coastal wetlands district, you'd be getting a variance from that provision that you can't construct a home there, right? And you would argue that topography's been altered and things have happened there that, you know, weren't of your design or fault. And there's, I'm sure, different arguments you can make there, I'm sure, pretty creative, you know, without that. But, I can't say one way or another, but I'm just saying that's the option. I don't know that there was a whole lot of other options if the determination is not overturned.
Well, I hadn't even thought of that. I understand that you read the letter of the law, and when it says 1969, and that map, and only that map. So, it makes me think now that if I ask for a variance from that one thing, I think, is what I'm asking for, because otherwise, I'm not asking for a variance to build houses necessarily, because houses are permitted in the zone. What I'm asking for, correct me if I'm wrong, is I'm asking for a variance from the constrictions of that particular code that cites the 69 soil survey map.
Well, since
Because
you,
again,
since you gave
I
us
don't
that
need-
soil map today, would you guys like to have a continuance for time to try and look over what you have in front of you and see if you can't come back with something more definitive?
My advice, Dana, would be to go with the continuance so that we can explore that option and then come back here with something concrete.
Right, and we'll just be careful how we phrase it, because it appears as though.
We're just looking for a
Well,
continuance of
just,
time.
you're not gonna resolve it right
Nothing's
now.
being phrased.
Just-
All right. So I'm gonna move that we continue 2510 Junior Dry Seal Trust, 605 Plymouth Ave, to, how much time you guys need? 2 weeks or a
It's
month?
the 11th. Why don't we do a month?
When's
It's the
when's the
18th.
month?
March 11th.
Which,
You just need it in,
which date?
March 11th?
March 11th?
just need it in writing because you have to act on an enforcement order within 100 days.
All right, so Jay, you'll give us that in writing? So we're going to move the meeting to March 11th and get it in writing. Do I have a second?
Second,
All in favor?
Larry Keane, aye.
Ryan Murphy, aye.
Jean Lee, aye.
Mac Brothers, aye.
Brian?
Brian Sullivan, aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right,
Thank you all.
so now we have 25-11, Richard M. Clements, in accordance with 305-1009 of the Marshfield Municipal Code. The petitioner is seeking an appeal of the building commissioner's denial for a building permit and the issuance of a cease and desist order dated December 6, 2024, on the property located at 16 Old Summer Street, which is further identified on the assessor's maps as being on parcel F170307C and is located in the R1 zoning district. Name and address for the record, go ahead.
Jeff, excuse me, Jeff DeLisi with Orenberger, DeLisi and Harris. I'm here with Brian Taylor of Stenbeck and Taylor, and my client Rick Clements is also on the call by Zoom.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, great. So, in 2022, the zoning board determined that there are two one-family dwellings on the property, which is obviously a pre-existing non-conforming use. In 2024, last year, in February, the board considered an application by my client to relocate one of those two one-family dwellings from a non-conforming setback situation to the center of the lot. The lot is over 4 times the land area required for buildable lots in Marshfield. It's over 4 acres large. And at the time, in February of last year, the one-family dwelling in question was 7 feet off the property line. When we went to the zoning board in February, I indicated to the board that the proposal would be for that the reconstructed dwelling that would be put into the center of the lot would be an open floor plan of a single story, which my client would reside in and retire in. The board approved that application, and other than my 2 or 3 statements to the effect that it's a single story dwelling in the center of the lot, there was no discussion by the board about limiting the height or the number of stories of the building. And I'm not sure why anyone would do that, because the footprint, as shown on the zoning plan at the time, had it 233 feet off the front yard, well over 100 feet off the rear yard, and 65 feet off the left side yard, and almost 80 feet off the right side yard. So obviously there was really no discussion. There was no condition limiting the height or the number of stories that was put into the decision. And it became final. I do think it's noteworthy that at the hearing in February, there was a general acknowledgement that the property could have been 81L'd, and 2 entirely separate lots could have been created by recording an 81L plan, which would have then allowed a building to be reconstructed without any limitation on height, obviously, on one of those 2 lots. In addition, I want to note to the board that there is the only reason for a special permit last year was because there were two one-family dwellings on the property. there was no need for a special permit to put the house in the center of the lot from the standpoint of dimensional nonconformities, because we were taking a nonconforming building and eliminating the nonconformity altogether. So, since the zoning hearing in February, my client applied for a building permit. There were at least 3 iterations of the building permit plan. And most recently, Mr. Stewart denied the building permit, from which denial we appeal, and that's what is in front of you today. I could understand Mr. Stewart's concern with respect to the number of stories, which was one of the bases for the denial. The other 2 bases for the denial had to do with whether Mr. Clements intended to reside on the property and qualified for an exemption under the building code, which really is not an issue that's actually really before you, even though it was put in the letter. And the other basis was that Mr. Stewart believes that the activity requiring fill requires a special permit. So essentially, I have 2 arguments before the board, one concerning the special permit requirement, and the other concerning the height requirement. And the reason, what Mr. Stewart had stated in his letter is that the board conditioned the decision or approving the last year's application on that it would only be 1 story. With respect to that argument, when you look at the decision, there is no such condition. When you look at the minutes of the hearing and watch the video, clearly I stated that our intention was to create 1 story, but there was no discussion, and I can understand why there was no discussion given the fact that we were eliminating a nonconformity and vastly conforming with the setback requirements. I think that if this was not a single-family dwelling that was being relocated, and if it was just a building of some accessory use, we probably wouldn't have needed a special permit at all and could build up to the requirement of the zoning bylaw. So in this case, Mr. Clements, by and large, has a open floor plan of 1 story, but he proposes a room above the garage, and that's the reason that trips the height requirement or the number of stories limitation that Andrew references. So that's the issue. I think the board needs to conclude whether it intended to impose a restriction on the number of stories as a condition of approval or not. At the time, the board consisted of the 2 Bryans, Larry, Grover, Heidi, and Jean. I'm not sure if any of you have opinions as to whether you intended to limit the number of stories. And with respect to the special permit, I wrote a letter to the board. My letter contained an argument. I do think that a special permit is not required when you read the black letter of the regulation, and that it's only required if you're engaging in a land alteration activity that is part of a primary use of the property. But nonetheless, as belt and suspenders, should the board disagree with my argument, we've applied for a special permit because we're bringing in more than 500 feet of general fill material and 500 cubic yards, rather, of general fill. And that's really where we're at tonight.
Okay. Andrew, do you want to add anything?
Just that I went back and watched everything. That's how I came up with the determination that we wanted the ZBA wanted a one-story structure, and that's what was proposed. And so when the plan came, ultimately by building code, by the zoning definition of the basement, because of the way the topography was, it was a 2.5, 3-story structure ultimately, because there's a floor above the garage. So then they came back with the plan for the retaining walls and adding fill around it to bring the grade up around so that the walkout would not be considered a floor. And then we also just had a large amount of fill started getting added to the property. And that's when I made the determination that the amount of fill that was going to be required in order to do that was going to go over the 500 cubic yards. And I respectfully disagree with the Attorney Delisi that the requirement for a special permit of more than 500 cubic yards is not limited to just a principal use, that it is any filling of land over 500 cubic yards requires a special permit. So that's kind of where we're at.
Thank you. Bob, do you have anything to add?
I agree with Attorney Delisi. The decision doesn't say single-story structure. It's my opinion your board should decide whether that was what you intended in light of the discussion that took place. I disagree with Attorney Delisi on the filling issue. I think this is a filling that requires a special permit.
Thank you. From the board?
I drove up there and took a look at this. This is probably, the third time this has been in front of the board. I don't see anything wrong with what they put in being any distraction from the neighborhood or detrimental to the neighborhood at all. They're building a new house. It's out front. You're not going to be impeding anybody's view by going up. By this proposal, the first floor is going to be underground with a walkout, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And the second floor, and what's going to be, the first floor, and then the second floor would be considered the living space over the garage, correct? That's what's putting you to that height?
I believe so, but I don't want to misspeak, so,
The second floor would be
yeah.
the
Entry level is the second
A
floor.
walkout
And
basement, then above the garage is
that's what's triggering the height, is the second.
Yeah, is the room above the garage, yeah.
He's
okay.
allowed,
Yeah.
in the R1 zone, we're allowed 2.5 stories and
Yeah.
55 feet
Mhm.
in height, which is half,
And you-
it's
yeah.
measured halfway up the
Certainly, you're going to be well below that, correct?
yeah. So,
Okay. And you are going to need 500 cubic yards of fill to make it a walkout like that?
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about fill around the building, which was what our
Correct,
fill
yep.
calculations are dealing with. There are other areas on the site,
Yep.
like driveway and so forth, but that particular area would be more than 500 cubic yards.
Yep.
And we do
Okay.
have on site, we quantified on the plan 4 different piles, just a few loam piles that have been screened, and we're going to reuse those. Any other loam that'll be stripped off the site will be screened and reused. And then we quantified one pile number 2 was 311 cubic yards, pile number 3 was 1,055 cubic yards. So that yardage should accomplish the general fill that we have to do on the plan. We have to bring in perk sand, but that's exempt under your under
Yeah.
the section.
So
So you're not
if we
bringing in
distribute-
500 yards?
Well, the only, we're going to be construction, I differentiate between building materials, stone.
Lawful construction
Stone for the
and-
foundation, compacted material for underneath the driveway, from fill, which is something you truck into to alter the grade. So, we've been 74 years in business, I've been running it for 40. Rick Savant has worked for me for 30 years, we talked about it today, and we can't remember ever having done one for a single-family residence. But, would rather belts and suspenders is the term that Jeff used, so.
Brian, do you have anything to add?
Always. So, I watched I went back and rewatched the video of the prior hearing, and there were a couple of points where Jeff mentioned that it's a it's a single-story structure at first, and then effectively said he was going to rebuild the single-story structure. I don't, and again, I've watched it, I think 2 or 3 times now, I don't think he said it's going to be rebuilt as a single-story structure. And for me, the critical question is it going to be more than 1 bedroom? And my understanding is that it was 1 bedroom, it's going to be 1 bedroom. The size, the shape, the architecture of the building is really, from my perspective, beyond the scope of our authority. That gets into taste. Now, would I build an enormous monument to my ego the size of this building? If I had the money, maybe I would. Maybe I wouldn't. But 1 bedroom, pre and post, the style, the size, that's outside the scope of our authority. Our decision said it's going to be rebuilt, it's going to be conforming, and from my perspective, that's really the end of the discussion. And I certainly can appreciate that they want what they want, and that's the size that works for them, and God bless them for that. Maybe it's not what you would do or what I would do, but they can, so why not? It's going to be 1 bedroom. That was the issue, and that's what they're proposing.
Thank you. Grover, are you still, sorry I skipped over you.
You're good. No, actually, hearing Brian, I do agree with what he's saying. The house from the front doesn't look anything out of the ordinary, not like a mansion. From the back, it looks bigger, but you want to have that view. As long as it comes out as a 1 bedroom, replacing a 1 bedroom, I'm happy.
Thank you. Heidi?
So, was this the one, Jeff, that it was gonna be like an age-in-place kind of thing, right?
Yeah, it was intended to be Rick's home that he was going to reside in when he retired, reside in and grow old in, yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so I don't recall us saying, other than you saying at one point, I thought that it was going to be for 1 floor, but I don't recall us having an issue with it being something other than that, other than a 1 bedroom, and I thought there was gonna be an office too, was that not? Did I miss that?
I don't recall saying anything about an office, but there was some discussion
We
towards.
changed the office because of the door, there was a door on it. You could have construed that as a bedroom, I believe.
Yes, that was the discussion, because Andrew was questioning whether we're calling basically a room something other than a bedroom when de facto would be a bedroom. So what we discussed at the end of the meeting was if that's a concern, widening the entrance to that room, things along those lines are things that are done sometimes with Board of Health to eliminate privacy and therefore eliminate bedrooms. And that was the discussion topic on that at the end of the meeting.
Okay. All right.
Look, Andrew clearly, I can understand why he would have this concern and would want kind of a definitive on this from the board. But there was never a circumstance where I ever would have agreed to limit the number of stories of this building, especially given the fact that it conforms dimensionally. That was the selling point here. We were taking a nonconformity and eliminating it and creating a building, albeit much larger, but which absolutely conforms in the center of a very large lot. So that was really the focal point of the discussion. That and the fact that whether this would actually be considered to be a dwelling or an accessory dwelling. Like, what was the nature of the grandfathered use? That was a discussion topic, which I think Attorney Galvin kind of crystallized with the board, but the issue of stories wasn't even discussed, other than me saying that it was going to be one story.
Gene, do you have anything?
No.
Mac?
Just a question, is 2511 is, my understanding, my view of it is this is a continuation of those previous meetings with this board. This is a, even though it's got a new number, this is linked to those last two as well.
Well, it's linked insofar as Attorney Guimond cited a case that states for the concept that the board is required to make a detailed record of proceedings. So if you signed a decision that was drafted not by yourself, or if you signed a decision, even if it was drafted by you, if you made an error, you intended to condition it and didn't, then the record proceedings could be read in to correct that error. And that's how it's linked.
Okay. And 2511A is something brand new?
11A, you have
Is
to...
the special permit for
This is
the
a
The
fill.
special permit, I anticipated that you would disagree with my argument, so I applied for what Andrew requested,
hence the belts and suspenders.
hence the belt and suspenders, and that's
Okay.
what that is.
Okay.
Yep,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
I'm content with what I have in front of me. Anything else from the audience? Go ahead. Name and address for the record.
Attorney Gene Guimond, 515 Pleasant Street, Marshfield, Mass. I'm here on
Gene,
behalf...
is your icon?
Attorney Gene Guimond,
Hey, closer
515
to you.
Pleasant Street. I'm here on behalf of Heather Guimond and Kurt Mustin. They reside at 35 Cornwell Hill.
Okay.
I guess the issue we have right now with this piecemeal approach that the applicant is taking is this started out in February. The representation was made by the applicant. Nobody else asked. The applicant made the representation that this was going to be a one-story dwelling. Why would anybody ask? Why would there be a discussion as to, oh, this and that, when the applicant is the one that stated it would be a one-story dwelling? The board could rely on that. The abutters relied on that. The general public relied on that. So now, instead of having appeal rights, that if the board actually did approve something more than a one-story, the abutters could have appealed that decision. The applicant could have appealed that decision. In June of 2024, the applicant came back in for clarification on the board's decision. This discussion didn't come up. There was no discussion about the one-story dwelling, except for the building inspector bringing it up. Nobody had complaints about it. Nobody shot the building inspector down there. So, to me, with this becoming now a new condition that you could have a one-story building, I don't know, where does that leave anybody who relied on the representations of the applicant? So do you thwart all the appeal rights of abutters, general public who relied on that? The decision that I did cite, basically, it's an attempt to preempt. In that decision, somebody came in and said, we're restricting the property, don't worry, we'll never use it for these purposes. Then years later, somebody else comes in, reads it, ha-ha, they didn't put this in the written decision, even though it was represented to the board at the hearing. And that's the game that's being played on this. As far as the special permit, it's definitely, that is needed. There's no primary, secondary exemptions. It's, here's the threshold for the fill, get your special permit. If this was protected and you could do this without having to get a special permit, as the argument was made, oh, well, secondary uses, you know, this is a secondary use to fill. Secondary uses aren't allowed in the R1 zoning district, so they'd have to be coming in for a variance for that. Regardless of how the board decides on the first two, they still can't do anything at the property until the Building Code of Appeals Board decides on whether or not the supervisor contractor is needed there because, as Attorney DeLisi agreed, that's outside of the board's jurisdiction and decision-making process. Thank you.
Thanks.
Just
Any other, go ahead.
one comment to that. There's a difference between presenting a conforming one-story building and actually limiting it to one story in the future in perpetuity. There's a big difference. And by submitting a one-story building, that certainly wouldn't preclude my client in the future from trying to make it a two-story building, so long as he complies with the law. The only impediment to that would have been if you discuss height and said, height somehow is a problem on this property, we want you to keep it to one story. That discussion never happened, and that's the distinction I'm making.
Thank you.
Yep.
Anyone else want to speak on this? Seeing that there isn't anyone, I'm going to move that we close.
Just before you close, I want to make sure that if it pleases the board, that you would vote separately on each of those two items that were the basis for denial of the building permit.
I think that's how you set it up, Bob, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Ryan, you also have to read the other one into the record.
Unless you're going to read it in after you vote.
Oh, I
on
thought we were
this.
going to decide this and decide that.
That's what I thought.
You're gonna do them separately?
Can I do them together?
Yeah, but you gotta open the other one. You never open the other one.
All right, so I guess I can open that one too.
I set them up so you were gonna do them separately.
Yeah, I thought I was doing them separately as well. I'll do them separately. So I'm going to move that we close 2511 Richard M. Clements, 16 Old Summer Street. Do I have a second?
Second,
All in favor?
Larry Keane, aye.
Brian Murphy, aye?
Jean Lee, aye.
Mac Brothers, aye.
Wait, no, mine.
We heard you. Grove, did we hear you?
Lorenzo, aye, yep.
Thank you. All right, so we
Sorry,
do,
Grover.
so we do this separately, Bob. It sounds like, is the board in favor of, we've decided that we don't have a problem with the height of the house. Is that correct?
That's my stance, yes.
That's my stance. So which one am I answering on that?
No, well, just in your deliberations, you should decide as a matter of fact whether you think that this was intended by your board to be a single-story structure. And if you think that it was intended, then you affirm Andrew's decision in that regard. And if you don't think it was intended to be limited to a single-story structure, then you overturn it overturn his decision. And then you can deal with the issue with a fill.
Okay.
I mean, there's a fill that's part of the enforcement issue, and there's a fill that's a part of a separate special permit request. So I think you should handle both the issue of whether it's a single-story structure and whether the fill is a violation first, and then you can announce the opening of the other public hearing and then deal with that as a special permit.
Okay.
Which you did. Because your action on the first could conceivably make the other issue moot.
All right, well, I doubt that, but, so I can move that the board, would uphold the portion of Andrew's decision about the fill, or?
Yes, and overturn it as to whether it's limited to a single-story structure. So it's I think what you're trying to articulate is a split.
Split decision.
Split,
Yeah.
right. Affirm in part, deny in part. So I gave you an affirm and.
Yeah.
I
you got-
move that the board uphold that portion of the December 6th decision of the building commissioner relating to the fill, and overturn that portion of the December 6th, 2024 decision relating to the limitation to a single-story structure.
Can I adopt what you said?
Yep, you can adopt that.
Adopt what Bob said. Do I have a second?
Larry Keane, second.
All in favor?
Larry Keane, aye.
Brian Murphy, aye?
Jean Lee, aye.
Mac Brothers abstain.
Heidi Conway, aye.
Robert Hensley, aye.
Brian Sullivan, aye.
Okay, so now we'll open up the second one.
Now to open your special permit.
Yeah. Um, So 2511A, oh, sorry, Richard M. Clements, the petitioners are seeking a special permit in accordance with 305-1103 of the Marshfield Municipal Code for the movement of on-site fill in excess of 500 cubic yards to blend the proposed single-family residence with the existing topography to conform with Title V septic system, construction and drainage to contain runoff on-site on the property located at 16 Old Summer Street, which is further identified on the assessor's maps as being on parcel F170307C and is located in the R1 zoning district.
So
Name and
Jeff-
address again for the
Yeah,
record.
Jeff DeLisi, Ornberger, DeLisi, and Harris. I'm here with Brian Taylor, Stenbeck and Taylor, and my client, Rick Clements. Essentially, I incorporate by reference what I said in the prior meeting with respect to the question of fill. The only thing I'm going to say in addition to that is, in looking at the requirements, section 1103, it appears to me that the goal of the special permit requirement is to safeguard the neighborhood. So the standard under section 1103, as I see it, would be whether our activity is done in a manner that's safe for the neighborhood. And I'd just point out that there's going to be a silt sock to make certain that there's no runoff site to adjacent property owners, and it would essentially take a trespasser to be harmed by this physically. So, in addition to that, I think that the board just needs to consider and indicate whether it believes all of the requirements that are typically required by special permits under the bylaw. I can't remember the section. That you believe that you find that you're assured that the application meets those requirements as well. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions from the board on this?
Well, I'm
I
good.
think it's pretty straightforward. Bob, you have anything to add?
Nope.
Andrew? Anyone else in the audience? Heidi? Come on up.
Gene Guimond, 515 Pleasant Street. I'm here on behalf of Heather Guimond and Kurt Mustonen at 35 Cornwell Hill. I agree regarding the special permit and the special permit for the fill are supposed to be designed to safeguard the neighborhood as well as aesthetics. And it states in there, in the bylaw specifically relative to vegetation, buffer screening, etc. With the elevation that's being brought in, the elevation of this structure, the proximity of 35 Cornwell Hill, the structure located on there, we believe that there should be some screening and buffers put in there as a condition to safeguard the screening on the neighbor's side. Additionally, the fill, as I showed on an exhibit that was submitted, is close in proximity. It's about 9 feet off on the property line. The property line hasn't been marked. Normally, if you're in there doing some work, you mark your property line so you're not going over, encroaching, and things of that nature. So we would like to make sure there's some safeguards put in there that also protects the integrity of the property line.
Andrew, could you pull that up on the GIS?
Do you want this, or do you want the
Oh.
satellites?
Sorry, the satellite view.
That's from October of
Okay.
last fall.
All right. So what do you where are you looking to put a buffer here?
The screening that we would like would be along the side from where the house is located on 35 Cornwell Hill. The problem sometimes that you have looking at this is every time I've seen a plan, the location of the proposed structure slightly changes. So it's hard to get a good read on that. But with the elevation, that's gonna, and the new height that is being allowed by the board, it's gonna be pretty high compared to that 35 Cornwell Hill. So a screening buffer, if it's put in there, would do a lot. And that's a condition I think is reasonable for the.
Is
board
it
to
in that little
impose.
corner you're talking about? So where is, yeah, if you could roll back
If you
to that.
see the exhibit that was with my
Yeah, I
letter.
saw the exhibit. So it looked like it was in that corner. It looks like there's a bunch of trees there now, but,
Well, that's the trees that are directly overhead on 35, the Cornwell Hill house. So if you go out, you can see up over to the left on my screen, it's cleared out where that's gonna be.
Bob, do we normally do buffers on, I don't remember doing.
You're free to make any conditions you think are reasonable.
Yeah, so I agree with Bob. You're free to make, if you think that screening, the only thing I'd say about it is, I don't see where in section 1103 it talks about aesthetics and screening.
It's incorporated into the overall special permit. So if you see in that 1103, it also incorporates the general special permit conditioning. So that's how it dovetails into that.
Okay, so thank you for that clarification. So I'm not sure, I mean, I don't know, my client probably would be okay planting some trees. It's just, we're talking about a special permit to fill in areas that are either excavated or depressed. Once you fill it in, unless you're looking from below gradient up, say behind the property where the topography slopes off, you can't even tell that there's fill, right? Like it's not, what would you be screening from? Would you be screening from the earth? Like, so I don't understand why. It appears to me as if the request for screening is to screen from the height of the building, which to me is something that would have been more germane to the past hearing than this. But Rick, I don't know if you have any opinions about screening.
I'll wait and see what the board thinks.
Yeah.
But, so does anyone have anything to add on?
I think there's plenty of privacy going on up there. If there was something that the neighbor felt they needed more, they could put up their own trees on their side of the lot line. I don't think it's a condition that I would enforce on the homeowner.
Okay. Grover, do you have anything?
I'm with
Okay. Brian?
Uncharacteristically, I am mute.
Heidi?
What is the distance to the next house that you would need screening from what he's gonna do?
Off of the, if you're looking at the screen, Heidi, the side yard on the top, which if you're facing it from the road is the left side yard, that distance just to the property line alone from, is 65 feet and change. On the opposite side, the distance just to the property alone is 79 feet and change.
You're going this is
94.
So,
he's talking about this house, the new house.
so if you
Okay.
want to give me, I don't know if that answers your question, or? Brian?
I'll clarify.
So the new proposed house, the sideline setback on the germane property line here is 22.6 feet. 20 foot is the minimum requirement in the R1 zone. And the other
Okay.
house, as far as the existing house on that property, Maybe, Andrew, you could put up the GIS. I think the other house is centered in their property. I think there's quite a setback. Yeah. So,
Right. This was the,
yeah, that doesn't show. That's the other house.
So the new one that's being
Oh.
proposed, how far is it from the neighbor?
From the neighbor's house,
The lot line.
That we're talking
lot-
about having to screen.
the lot line, 22.6 feet. If you had to guess that their house is the one in the middle of the lot there, I'm guessing that's about 60 feet, maybe?
Well, we'll get
Yeah,
that.
Andrew, maybe you could snap that distance, great.
90 feet.
I was conservative.
So I'm good, there's no screening. We have things that go up that they're 5 feet and no one's requiring anything, so.
All right. Thank you, Heidi. Jean, do you have anything to add?
No, I agree with Heidi, that
Mac?
90 feet is.
Okay. Name and address for the record.
Kurt Mustonen, 35 Cornwall Hill. I've been watching this pile of soil grow for months, and it's about 9 feet above grade now. And I don't know where the house is going to be. Last week, Ricky said it was going to be, way up there by the Reeves house. But from what I'm seeing, it's going to be next to me, and I shouldn't have to use my property for a buffer. And it's been quite the shell game to watch dilapidated cottage that was collapsing and then got crushed even more, turn into a 3-story house or whatever you're proposing, and you don't exactly tell me where. And Ricky said that, those stakes are all wrong, but the fill is on my property. There was a marker there. I can't see it anymore. It's like 9 feet tall. Yes, sir.
I don't know who Ricky is.
Ricky Clement.
client,
Okay.
property owner.
I'm sorry.
I think the property should be staked along the side yard, so I think that should be a condition of approval.
He said the stakes were all wrong and he was going to move the house way up by the Reeves. But that's what he told me last week. But the stories keep changing, if you will. And not knowing if he's going to keep going and make a big cliff of fill and then put a big house up there, you'd be looking down onto my property, onto my house. And I oppose that greatly. So I think he should build a buffer if the house is going to be there, but it went from one house per property to now there's going to be 3 houses on the property. The cottage they're going to move but not use, and then they're going to build a house, but it's only going to be one bedroom. And the project just keeps getting larger and larger. So that's why I'm here.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted
Rid of
to,
the,
yeah,
were we not getting rid of the studio? That not leaving?
the building is remaining, but it's not to be a dwelling, it's to be an allowed accessory building.
Remember, they had to leave the 2 things up, and then you remove the items that make it habitable.
Oh, the kitchen, et cetera. Okay,
Yeah,
so,
because you can't
I
have
mean-
2, we couldn't have the 2 dwellings at the same time.
So is the fill, what Mr. Messerman just said, is it gonna be up on a knoll, if you will, so?
Brian, can you,
We are looking down on someone else's
what's the
property,
difference in
of course.
elevation?
So the difference in elevation, top of foundation, 6713, boundary line is about 57. So there'll be a swale, we did a swale all the way down both sidelines, both property lines, positive drain and contain any runoff on site, and then a 3-to-1 slope, which is mowable, from, up to the house, which is.
It sounds like, so from the property line of, sorry,
Mr. Mustonen?
Mr. Mustin, and
There'll be a 3-to-1 slope.
going up in your favor. so-
Transition from 58 to 64,
All right,
6 feet.
6
over
feet.
22 feet.
Could I
Go
just
ahead.
get some clarification as to what is the current elevation? I don't need the slope and all this other stuff, but before the fill is brought in, what's the current elevation? After the fill is brought in, what's the elevation? And then you add the elevation of the house. That answers questions for me instead of slopes and swales and everything
So
else.
the contour in the middle, the existing contour in the middle of the house is 56, and the top foundation is proposed at 57. I'm sorry, at 67.
So 10 feet
Top of
higher.
foundation, so there'll be less, but the grade is proposed at 66. It's 9 to
All right.
9.5 feet on average.
Does anyone else have any other questions? Seeing that there is none, I'm going to move that we close 2511A, Richard M. Clements, 16 Old Summer Street. Do I have a second?
Second,
All in favor?
Larry Keane, aye.
Brian Murphy, aye.
Jean Lee, aye.
Mac Brothers, aye.
Heidi Cohen, aye.
Rob Manzi, aye.
Brian Sullivan, aye.
I move that the board vote to grant the petition's application for a special permit, subject to conditions. Does anyone have any conditions they'd like to add? Seeing that there's none, based on the finding that
I believe we were gonna put a condition there to mark the property.
Oh, yeah,
Is that
Mark,
correct?
so the condition that we mark the, what side property line is that, Brian?
The southerly property line.
Southerly property line. We might, should we mark the other neighbor as well? I think it's
Sure.
only fair. Mark both sides of the property line. That's the condition. Based on a finding that the applicant's proposal for an on-site fill in excess of 500 cubic yards to blend the proposed single-family residence with the existing topography to conform with Title V septic system, construction, and drainage to contain a runoff on-site and on the property located at 16 Old Summer Street, as shown on site plan showing proposed house and sewerage system by Stenbeck and Taylor, dated May 23rd, 2024, with last revised date of January 8th, 2025, adding soil volumes, meets the special permit criteria of section 1010 and 1103 of the bylaw. Do I have a second?
Second,
All in favor?
Larry Keane, aye.
Brian Murphy, aye.
Jean Lee, aye.
Mac Brothers abstain.
Heidi Cohen, aye.
Rob Manzi.
Brian Sullivan, aye.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you all very much.
Now we have 2473 Patrick Carberry. In accordance with 305-1009 of the Marshfield Municipal Code, the petitioner is seeking an appeal of the building commissioner's notice of violation for a non-compliant modification of a flood-proof structure and violations of the Marshfield floodplain bylaw on the property located at 1190 Ferry Street, which is further identified on the assessor's maps as being on parcel 115-24-19, is located in the R3 zoning district. Go ahead.
Good evening. Patrick Carberry. I live at 1190 Ferry Street with my wife Stephanie, and I appreciate the commission hearing the appeal tonight. So in about 10 minutes, I'll try to go through where we are with this. I've got a narrative, I've got a history of what's going on with this property, the violations that were filed, what happened at the Mass Building Appeals Board a few weeks back. Many of these issues got cleared up with variances. One remaining issue has not. And I'd like to take the board through where we are. So, can I have the next slide, please? Is it okay for me to go through this?
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, so the narrative and the timeline for the appeal, on September 19th last year, received a violation, 5 violations around non-compliant flood-proof structure by the building commissioner and floodplain administrator due to a 1992, 32 year ago, raising of the structure by a previous owner, along with a more recent 2021 minor modification that involved doing a driveway and increasing the size of the pad in the garage. All that to try to avert, water from intruding the garage, going through the entry to the crawl space and filling the crawl space up. I was suggested to go to Mass Building Code Appeals Board, which we did. That was a long meeting. There was debate, there was disagreement, and there was a compromise that was finally settled on, allowing variances on 4 of the 5 violations. And now I'm here tonight to talk to you folks about considering a variation on the 5th violation, which was replacing the current windows in the basement crawl space with smart flood vents. Next slide, please. So, 40 minutes into the hearing, the chair of the BCAB said, Michael McDowell said, I don't understand why these violations were ever served. He said the crawl space in 92 was 32 years ago and fully permitted. The 2021 driveway project was also fully permitted, and perhaps Mr. Stewart might have missed a flood violation then, but it was approved. But there was no new project. There was nothing new happening at this property under consideration. So what triggered this assessment at Mr. Carberry's residence? So the debate continued, and I'll summarize in a few more slides where we ended up with that. So here's the house. It's in an AE10 flood zone. I'm familiar with flood zones because I was for several years a conservation commissioner in this great town of Marshfield. This is the view from Ferry Street, from the top of the new house across the street. Next slide, please. This shows the picture from the riverside. This is the South River. Back in the early 1990s, they raised the house, they poured that foundation, a new crawl space, and they bermed the front yard, and they put a Jet 500 septic system in the front of this house. The closest water has ever gotten to this home in the front is maybe about 8 feet from the front steps on that deck. Not so the case in the back, which I'll share in a few more slides. Next slide, please. So here's the timeline on the structure. 76 years, built as a cottage in 48, numerous additions and modifications made over the 44 years. In 1992, Charlie Firamonti, who lives across the river from me now, who owned the house, raised the house, new concrete foundation, new crawl space, hired Biviano. They spent about 30 grand doing that. The documentation shows building permits, elevation certificate, meeting the standards at that time. And there were regular windows installed in that crawl space. And there were not breakout panels like the elevation certificate said. Advanced to 2014, my wife and I buy the house. It was a mess. It needed a lot of work. We had some pretty big floods. And the biggest one, I'll share some pictures with you in a second. But in 2021, at the suggestion of Patrick Brennan and a local friend of mine who does does site prep, he said, why don't you regrade your driveway? Your driveway's a mess anyway. Increase the slab in your garage. He said, increase it 12 inches in the back, 9 inches in the front. Keep the water from coming into the garage and entering through the access hole in the garage. And he says, I can do the rough prep. Pat Brennan can do a plan. Chris Gray can do the foundation. It's going to work great. You've got the room in the garage to do that. So we signed up for it, $14,000 to do that job, and it was successful. It's actually worked quite well. A number of years go by. All of a sudden, I get a violation, 5 violations from the building inspector and the floodplain manager, kind of out of the blue. Next slide. So here's the big flood. A 3-foot flood surge in March of 2018. People say maybe it was a 50-year, maybe a 100-year flood. You're looking at my garage on the left with the yellow ladder. That water came up a few more feet. The picture on the right with my winter tires, that's the crawl space, and that had 2 or 3 feet of water into it as well. And the water all came in around the street, up the garage, up the driveway, into the garage, into that crawl space. At that time, I did not have a sump pump to deal with the water. I had to put a fire. One of my fighting friends brought a pump and a big hose, and we pumped it out. That was the last time that was ever going to happen. Next slide. So we start the driveway project. It's 2021. We had to rough grade the driveway. We tore it all up. The closest to the foundation was raised a little bit, but it was all kind of graded down so the water would shed into the street. Next slide, please. This was all fully documented. This is Pat Brennan's diagram of the slab on the end. Next slide, please. Here's another view of the slab, and as you look into the garage on the picture way on the left, you can see the grade from the garage into the driveway. picture in the middle shows you the 9 inches at the original sill of the garage that we're going to have to meet with the driveway. So that had to be specially reinforced. And then the little stairs on the side, you can see a door right behind the stairs. That's where the utility closet is, hot water heater, furnace. That was raised many years ago. And we put the stairs back in after we finished the project. Next slide, please. Just another closer picture of all that work as it goes along. Next slide, please. So here we go. This is what you get for $15,000 with excellent Marshfield contractors. Beautiful Chris Gray concrete floor, 12 inches in the back, 9 inches in the front. Beautiful new graded driveway, asphalt by Mr. Sullivan. And this thing has worked fantastically well over all these years. We've had some pretty good storms come in, a nor'easter, 2-foot surges on top of a 10 or 11-foot tide. Been watching water come in now for 11 years since we've lived there. So this worked out great. It was probably the best $14,000, $15,000 I've spent. Next slide, please. So here are all the permits. Permit from Concom. Next slide. Building permit. And of course, during these days, I'm a conservation commissioner, so of course I'm going to follow all the rules to a T because I get no special consideration in those days. So here's the permitting for from the building commissioner. Next slide, please. Here's the floodplain review. This was completed and signed off on by Andrew on July 26th. Next slide, please. Here's the elevation certificate. I think this is one of the last ones Roger Crawford at EET ever completed. Next slide, please. Final building inspection from Dan Carlo. All set to go. All the payments have been made. Really excited to get all this work done. Meanwhile, I'd also put the sump pump on a backup generator in the crawl space. Next slide, please. So here come the violations. September 19th. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them. And I'll come back to this in a later slide. I want to share what happened at the Mass Building Appeals Board. Next slide, please. Here's the meeting that happened on January 9th. Next slide, please. Here's again that quotation from Chair McDowell. What triggered this assessment of Mr. Carberry's property? Next slide, please. So after a debate and a couple hours, they compromised. They were worried about water still coming into the foundation and hydrostatic pressure on one side of the foundation with flood water on the other side. So they gave a variation on the top one. The crawl space was done 32 years ago, met all the standards at the time. Mechanical systems, those were also raised back in those days. Non-flood resistant materials, the whole crawl space is all concrete. Not meeting special flood hazard standards. That whole 2001 garage driveway project was fully permitted with complete transparency and has actually worked out great and did not constitute a major renovation, so it shouldn't have triggered any fresh or new standards. So the compromise was flood vents. You're going to have to put the flood vents in. So that's how the meeting ended. So Andrew had asked that we fill the crawl space 1.3 feet. He asked that we remove non-flood resistant material, but there really wasn't anything. It was all concrete. One of the utility closet raised 5 inches for my hot water heater and the furnace. 5 inches wasn't going to make any real benefit to the property, even though it does get it up to the 11 feet base flood elevation. I understand all that. And the flood vents were still in the ask. So I guess I'm one of the only people that didn't come with my own attorney tonight. Maybe I should have, but I did call an attorney friend. I'm actually a biochemist. I'm not an attorney, nor am I an engineer. But the advice I got was as follows. This is a 32-year reach back to a fully permitted, successful 1992 project. The driveway project was also fully permitted and approved. The structure my attorney friend said is actually grandfathered in and is a pre-existing non-conforming structure. The crawl space has an automated sump pump should any water make it into that crawl space and need to be pumped out as to not create an imbalance in hydrostatic pressure. The 4 smart vents, I know what those are all about. They're 16 inches by 8 inches. My windows are 36 inches by 16 inches. So it's a pretty big project to change all those out, and I've got some pictures of that. I've got a quotation that from our local contractor who wants $7,500 to do this, all right? Which is not a small project. What really concerns me is there seems to be a continuing pattern of selective enforcement on myself and either current or former members of the Conservation Commission, including other members, Kilcoyne, Laggy, Ring, and myself. In my case, this is the 3rd time I've been kind of targeted for these sort of things. There's no real reason that all of a sudden I'm being enforced on and served violations. I'm not looking for special treatment. I'm looking for the same treatment as everybody else. But I think I am getting special treatment here. The last comment my attorney friend made was this seems to him to be a possible ethics violation. That is not anything I want to do, but I'm angry enough to consider actually doing that because this is just not fair. I've got a few other slides that show you windows and vents if you're interested. That's the crawl.
Real quick, now, the vents you're talking about would replace your windows,
That's
correct?
a 36-inch by 18-inch window.
Yep.
And so it would all have to be taken out, and you would have to rebuild the foundation.
Yep.
And mount the 18-inch by 6-inch.
No, I
8-inch.
got that, but what
Yeah.
they're talking about, where your window is, would be replaced by a vent, correct?
Right. So there's one in the front.
Yep.
There's one on the side. The one you're looking at is the one on the street side front. And then there's 2 at the front of the house that are actually buried under the deck. And then that little one on the left is the access hole in the garage. They do sell four gang flood vents, but they're like $5,000 a piece, for one set. So these are just pictures of the windows. The picture on the bottom and the left is the access hole from my garage new slab, into the crawl space. And I store boat stuff down there and beach chairs and, stuff that isn't going to be affected by moisture. And there's the sump pump that works great. That's on a generator backup. So when water come in, it gets pumped out. So I've done everything I can think to do to this home to make it more flood resistant, other than raise it and put it 11 feet in the air on piles, like the majority of the other houses. I don't see a $7,500 smart vent job, improving the flood-proofness of this particular home. And it seems a little punitive to me. But moreover, I'm more concerned about being consistently targeted for these sort of things. I don't think it's right, and I'm actually pretty angry about it.
Okay, is that it?
That's it.
Thank you. Andrew, do you have something?
Yes, I do. So I disagree with the vast majority of what Mr. Carter has said.
Of course you do.
A lot of what he said is inaccurate as to what the actual requirements are, what the result of the hearing was, and also as far as what it takes to become into compliance here. I do have a real quick response, quicker than his for you. And this is the actual discussion by the Building Code Appeals Board at the state level. And then their motion and decision, which I will remind the board, that's a building code state decision and you have no authority to overturn it. the sections that I'm kind of looking at. So, 3.2.1.2, modifying the structural systems of the building that compromise its structural ability to resist fortification, collapse. So, he did do that, or somebody. Ultimating the flood-proof enclosure in violation of flood resistant, so that it was done, and we're talking about, maybe we should probably put that back. So, I'd say 322.1.3, we need to put those back. Maintain protection for mechanical, plumbing, electrical systems in a flood structure. So that's, we look at the water system that's down there, water tank or something. The reality is it's gonna flood again if we want it.
No, it's not.
The materials used that are not flood resistant, that probably should be corrected as well. I actually want to ask the building official what those particular materials are in the area. Stuart, could you, Andrew Stewart, could you, explain to me, what are the materials that are damaged, that are something that, they're not damage resistant?
So, Andrew Stewart, the windows themselves are, that's the biggest thing is the windows, they have blocked up with permanent photos. If you remove the windows, you still have to have the photos. You can also lock the photo things up and install smart vents in their place, so that will be compliant. So there are several options there for bringing the flood openings aspect into compliance and solving three of those issues. Okay? Now, the mechanical equipment is above the flood elevation that FEMA requires. So it's compliant with FEMA. So if you get a waiver or a variance from that, you would not be violating anything from FEMA. FEMA also allows crawl spaces up to, I think, 2 feet under one of the technical motions. That's not something we allow in Massachusetts, but we do allow it under the 5th edition of the code. So, the reason I wrote it the way I wrote it is because when there is a violation on something like this, you then are supposed to, but I can't make any modifications in a flood zone, I have to do this. That's how you gotta bring it into compliance. Now, that's why we have this variance process and we have this appeal process, and so the building code to it, say, okay, well, it needs FEMA, it doesn't meet the stricter standards of Massachusetts, and we grant them some relief on this thing. So from me and my perspective, the biggest thing is the flood ordinance, because that right there is cannot look at resistant materials, it is the obstructions to the enclosure, and it's the thing that puts the housing in HLP ultimately. The rest of it, they're gonna get water down there, if they've got to pump it out afterwards, after a flood, I mean, there's gonna be a lot of people for that. There's gonna be, obviously, flood damage, water damage to certain stuff, where they have to fix it, but if they don't have to fill their whole crawl space, you can still maintain it, and it doesn't violate FEMA standards, and that's something that I think feels for good grant.
Please state your name and please.
I just can't do it.
All right. This is a tricky one. Okay, guys,
No, it's not.
we're just gonna run through that list on that provided by your town. I'm gonna make a motion to uphold the building official's decision on R 322.1.2, R 322.1.3, R 22.1.6, R 322.1.8. However, we're going to grant the variance to those sections, R 322.1.2, R 322.1.3, R 322.1.6, R 322.1.8. And the variance would be to remove the windows in the basement and replace them with approved, flood openings, flood vents or openings. And I will second. Go ahead, second. I have a motion to accept. Any further discussion? Hearing none, the roll call vote. I think this is a good, alternative that satisfies pretty much everyone. Jake Newlander. Aye. John Kuchar. Aye. Martin Carroll, aye. Thank you. All right, so thank you for suffering through that with me. I just wanted to make sure that that got on the record, because, like I said, the zoning board of appeals cannot overturn a decision by the building code appeals board. The building code appeals board upheld that there were violations of the building code. They ordered Mr. Carberry to fix the flood openings, okay, and put approved flood openings in. The written decision hasn't come out, but as you can see, I have the entire video of the entire hearing, and everybody's welcome to watch that if they want. We'll put it into the record. But you know, this is the point. He has a violation. The building code appeals board agreed with it. So the violation for the zoning violation is if he's violating a standard of a Massachusetts flood hazard standard. So clearly he is, because the building code appeals board found that he was. So thus he is in violation of the local zoning bylaw until he fixes his building code violation. Now this is very similar to Art Lage, Jim Kilcoyne, and Joe Ring. Art Lage had several violations on his property. He fixed them without complaining, and I issued him back a letter at the end saying he's resolved all his violations. Jim Kilcoyne, issued him a bunch of violations. We went through all the permitting, issued him a letter at the end that he has resolved all his violations. Joe Ring had a violation, legitimately. He's now chosen to elevate his house on a brand new timber foundation and bring it into complete compliance. And he's doing that, and he's gonna get a letter saying that he no longer has a violation. That's all Mr. Carver has to do. My job is to enforce the flood hazard standards. If a house had previously been elevated and has flood vents in it, they have to maintain that from that point. This structure was altered. That's what the building code found, all right? Now, what I have to do when I issue a violation is I have to order them to bring it up to the current standards. That's what I have to do because we're a CRS community and part of the community. These are the things that I have to do. But then it goes to the building code appeals board and they can decide, okay, it doesn't necessarily have to go to the Massachusetts standards as long as it meets the FEMA standards, which is what exactly happened here. They only have to meet the Massachusetts standards, which is either remove those windows completely and leave it wide open, put in breakaway panels with some sort of flood opening, or have some other sort of non-engineered flood opening installed. He doesn't have to block up the foundation. He can put pressure-treated wood with pressure-treated plywood and install a smart vent in it. But Mr. Carter has refused to ever actually inquire to me directly, what it would take to resolve this thing. Instead, he's just resorted to tactics of supposed ethics violations, which I don't even see how that would be possible. So that's where I stand with this one.
All right, thank you.
Can I say something further, Brian?
Sure.
If you drive up and down Ferry Street, Ridge Road, cross the bridge, you look at homes with foundations, all in AE10 flood zones, there are dozens and dozens and dozens of homes that have those same sort of basement windows. And
Are you talking about Situate when you say across the bridge?
yeah,
Okay, well, we're Marshfield.
I know,
So
but
let's stay on this side of the bridge.
all right, but there are plenty on Ridge Road, there are plenty on Ferry Street as well. And do I want to have to spend $7,500 for this retrofit, which I don't believe, after living there for 11 years through all these floods, is going to have any benefit to the property? No, I don't. I've already spent thousands of dollars on this. And the issue I have is I'm being treated specially. I'm being targeted by this building inspector, and there's a history of that with all the other commissioners in town, whether their issues are resolved or not, and I have an issue with that. I think there's an ethics issue with that, and I don't want to have to do that. I really don't. It's a waste of time to have to do that. I guess it depends what happens tonight.
Okay. So Bob, do we have any authority to overturn something from the state board? We don't.
Their decision is final on the state building code issues.
Yeah.
You
So
only
we-
can rule on matters in the zoning, zoning bylaw.
So we
You
have no
to
authority.
vary the zoning bylaw, and you have the right to interpret the zoning bylaw, but your authority is limited to the zoning bylaw, not the state building.
Okay, but one last question. When I responded to Andrew's letter, it said I could either appeal to the Mass Building Code Appeals Board or ZBA. So I went to apply to ZBA. I wrote all the checks. I created the presentation, filled out all the forms. And then Andrew said, no, you can't go through ZBA. You got to go through Building Code of Appeals first. So what would have happened if I had come here first? I mean, Andrew was the one that made that decision.
We don't have jurisdiction over the state building code.
We would only be able to decide on anything that is, I don't know what the other violations were, but maybe they would have fallen under something we could have done.
But I guess my question was
All those
why,
violations are building code violations, you have no authority over it.
So,
That's why he has to go to building code appeals board first, then deal with zoning. If Mr. Clemens was here, he would do this exact same thing, because he had a dual violation. It was on a previous hearing that we heard tonight. He has the building code violation of the definition of a homeowner, where I denied the permit, and then he had the separate thing. The building code appeals board, he filed one with them, an appeal with them. They sent it back, they denied it as moot. They said you have to deal with zoning first in this situation, right? Because of that aspect, but not in this one. In this one, where it's a flood hazard standard, it is completely different. It always trumps everything.
yeah, well, that may all be true, Andrew, but I was specifically targeted this time for the third time, and it's the last time, so.
The previous two times when he did the garage, that was a stop work order because I was driving down the street. I issued 2 stop work orders that day, one for him, one for his neighbor who was doing unpermitted deck. And then luckily I did issue a stop work order because because it wasn't being done correctly. They had to redo it, get it properly designed. The design that he showed up on the slide earlier, I actually denied and made Pat Brennan redesign it. And when Pat Brennan redesigned it, I asked him, why did you do that? And he said, well, that's what Mr. Carberry said that you wanted to have happen. And it didn't make any sense to me. And I said, well, it doesn't make any sense because it's not right, and it's not what I said needed to happen. So,
Andrew, from my perspective, you do not have to explain to this board how you do your job and why you do your job. I have never questioned for 1 second your integrity and your ability.
I agree with that. So I'm gonna move, Andrew, do you know the date of this letter? I mean, what do we do here? Is this thing moot? Or to decide, Bob, that we uphold Andrew's decision?
It's the state court, right?
Bob, is this moot, or do we just uphold Andrew's decision?
You have one issue that you have to decide, and that's whether he's gonna be able to put in the smart fence.
Okay,
And that's what the state had ordered.
ordered.
Correct?
So I'm gonna have to move that the board uphold. Do you know the date of it, Andrew?
January 9th was the Building Code of Appeals.
But when did
September
Andrew's-
19th was Andrew's violation letter.
September 19th?
Yeah.
Can I say real quick with this too, with the flood violations with Andrew, you look at his past record, he's very thorough on this. So I really don't see Andrew targeting anybody. I don't think that's the case. You two may not personally get along, that's people, that's humans, but Andrew is very thorough. If you watch any of these times that Andrew.
I'm sure he's thorough,
Very thorough.
but why didn't he catch this when we signed off on the driveway project. There was a flood permit applied for, I paid the $50 for it.
Yep.
Why did he come back?
Same result.
All right, well, we're done talking about this, so I'm gonna move that
Me
we
too.
close 2473 Patrick Carberry, 1190 Ferry Street. Do I have a second?
Second,
All in favor?
Larry Keane, aye.
Brian Murphy, aye.
Jean Lee, aye.
Mac Brothers, aye.
Renzi,
Brian?
Brian Sullivan, aye.
I
I
move
don't
that
know what happened to Heidi.
she's not on this. I move that the board,
Driving me home.
I move that the board uphold the September 19th, 2024 decision of the building commissioner. Do I have a second?
Larry Keane, second.
All in favor?
Larry Keane, aye.
Brian Murphy, aye.
Jean Lee, aye.
Mac Brothers, aye.
Renzi,
Brian Sullivan, aye.
Thank you.
Really glad I spent years and hours of my time working for the benefit of this town and the people in this town on the Conservation Commission.
Thank you. All right, now we have Jean and William Cook, 2479.
I don't see them on Zoom.
They're not here? Well, I'm gonna read it in. Oh, no, this is continued. I don't have to read it in. They're not here? Let's go with Ronald and Sherry Murphy here. Come on up. 2508, Ronald and Sherry Murphy. The petitioners are seeking a special permit in accordance with 305-1012 and 305-902 of the Marshfield Municipal Code to raise the existing structure and construct a new 2.5 story, 40-foot by 28-foot dwelling with a garage underneath, a 10-foot by 16-foot enclosed porch with room above, and relocate the existing 12.4 by 20.4 garage onto a new foundation on the property located at 43 Bayview Street, which is further identified on assessors maps as being on parcel K120321, is located in the R3 zoning district.
All right.
Name and address for the record.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Gabriel Padilla from Grady Consulting. From the last time we were here, there was some concern on the location of the building. It was shown in the plan as outside of the rear setback. That has been corrected. It was a typo in the plan. The plan that we have now has all the requirements in order to get this passed.
This was the scrivener's error?
Yes, yes. Yeah, after going back to the office.
So you fixed the setback?
Yes.
All right.
Well, I fixed the location of the building to be
Yeah.
within the setback, yes.
So Andrew, did you have any problems with the new design?
Oh, boy, do I. No, I'm just kidding. It's fine.
It's fine, yeah. Bob, do you have any questions?
My biggest issue was with the grading and everything, making sure that the building height was okay, but, you know, as long as they have that revised here. My only thing about the building height was where we're going to 34.5, and maybe Bob, you can explain. For a gambrel, is it the highest slope roof, or is it the eave to the ridge? I know for a gable, it's the slope. I would imagine it's the same for a gambrel.
Does it work in the gambrel still, Andrew?
It works for this one, it works as a gambrel. It's 34.6 to the midline,
Yeah.
you know? But that was my only initial question, was just making sure that the grades all worked out, because it was so close, 34.6 to the midline, only you're 6 inches off if you get the grade wrong, around it. So I just wanted to
Make sure.
cognizant of that at the end of the job.
All right, thank you. Any questions from the board?
Nope.
Audience? We've heard-
That height issue is midpoint of the highest gable.
Right. But Andrew said it still works, so. Anything from the audience out there? Seeing that there's none, I'm gonna move that we close Ronald and 2508 Ronald and Sherry Murphy, 43 Bayview Street. Do I have a second?
Larry Keane, second.
All in favor?
Larry Keane, aye.
Brian Murphy, aye.
Jean Lee, aye.
Mac Brothers, aye.
Heidi Klum, aye.
Art Honzia.
All right.
Ryan Sullivan, aye.
So, now- Let me just make sure I'm on the right address, 43 Bayview. I move that the board vote to grant petitioner's application for a special permit, subject to the conditions. Andrew, can you quickly whip that out to me, because I don't see your thing?
Yeah, they would require a demolition permit for each structure, a building permit for each structure, a certified as-built, and a certificate of occupancy.
So no flood stuff?
Nope, it's out of the floodplain.
Okay,
Luckily.
thank you. I'm accepting what Andrew said.
Gabe's been present for a couple of these wild ones.
That's good. So, based on the finding that the applicant's proposal to raise the existing structure and construct a new 2.5-story, 40-foot by 28-foot dwelling with a garage underneath, a 10-foot by 16-foot enclosed porch with room above, and relocate the existing 12.4 by 20.4 garage onto a new foundation on the property located at 43 Bayview Street, as shown on a plan by Grady Consulting LLC dated December 30th, 2024, showing addition and garage changes and architectural plans by Bob Burgess and dated December 20th, 2024, 9 pages. Meets the special permit criteria of section 10.12 of the bylaw. Do I have a second?
Larry Keane, second.
All in favor?
Larry Keane, aye.
Brian Murphy, aye.
Jean Lee, aye.
Mac Brothers, aye.
Art Honzia.
Heidi Klum, aye.
Ryan Sullivan, aye.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a good night.
You too. Sorry I skipped over you, Greg. But that one was probably quicker than you. So now we have 2502 Celebrity Realty LLC off Main Street.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is what was emailed to us today, correct?
Yes, we emailed it this morning, and
Yeah, Nancy
Nancy
sent
said I could bring copies tonight.
All right, go ahead.
Great, thank you. For the record, Gregory Morse, Registered Engineer, Morse Engineering, representing the applicant, Celebrity Realty Trust. This is a continued hearing for the property at 0 Main Street, known as the Marshfield Hills Estates Definitive Subdivision. We were seeking special permits in accordance with Section 13.01, which is the Inland Wetlands Protection District, and Section 11, which is fill in excess of 500 cubic yards. At the last meeting, I outlined the project to you, and I can dive into that again if you'd like. It's a new cul-de-sac street, a new subdivision road, providing access to 10 new single-family homes. The property's in the R1 zoning district. It's 18 acres in size. The project disturbs approximately 50% of that with the roadway and the construction of the 10 new lots. I've shaded in green the areas that are preserved or outside the limit of work on the plan. At the last meeting, the board had requested that a peer review of the site and of the calculations be done by Pat Brennan. He has done that, and he has submitted a letter yesterday to the board. We received his comments and responded this morning in a letter that was emailed to the board, and I just handed out the hard copies of that letter. I can go through Pat's comments in just a moment, but I wanted to also bring the board up to speed that the Conservation Commission has approved this project. They have issued an order of conditions for the project. And secondly, since the last time I was before you, we conducted a site visit. I know Mr. Murphy was there, the town planner was there, a member of the planning board, and Mr. Stewart were in attendance, as well as myself.
Larry was there.
I was there.
Larry was there, yeah, sorry, Larry, yeah. So, in response to Mr. Brennan's, I'll just run through his comments. I do see him on, so I expect you're gonna hear from him as well. The first comment was regarding the amount of fill on the site. We submitted a cut and fill plan previously. It's approximately 48,000 cubic yards. Mr. Brennan says that's 2,000 truckloads of fill. That's the amount that's required to construct the subdivision in accordance with the subdivision rules and regs and applicable Title V septic requirements for the septic systems. It won't all be imported to the site at one point in time. It would be broken up. Essentially, the applicant wants to phase the project. Phase one would be construction of the road. So half of that quantity would be coming in at various points during the road construction. The road construction is expected to take probably 9 months to a year to complete. The second phase would be the individual lots, and those would be built probably over a period of several years as each of the individual lots gets built out. This is an ideal location for a site that has fill. As far as it's on a Mass DOT street, access is very good. We're not cutting through any small residential neighborhoods or small local streets to access this site. Comment number 2 in Mr. Brennan's letter was with respect to fill that we had proposed within 10 feet of the property line at the stormwater basin. Our plans showed in this vicinity here that we would have fill approximately a foot from the property line. What we did is we put together a sketch plan attached to the back of this letter that shows we could put a 0 to 3 foot or 1 to 3 foot high boulder wall 10 feet from the lot line, essentially acting as a retaining wall, and eliminate that fill up against the lot line with a boulder wall approximately 3 feet at its max height. The third comment was with respect to the Inland Wetlands District, and there were a couple of comments here. Section 13.01F, condition number 1 requires that lots be serviced by a municipal water system. I wanted to point out to the board that of the 10 lots here, 9 of the lots are proposing homes outside of the Inland Wetlands District. And our read of the zoning bylaw, the houses that are outside of the district, as long as they have 80% of their lot area contiguous land outside of the district, that Section 13 does not apply. So the only lot here would be Lot 2 that would apply. Lot 2, you'll see, has the district going through the midpoint of the house. To the extent that Lot 2 is within the district, the majority of the home is outside. The well and the septic are outside of the district. This lot can't connect to the town municipal system because there is no municipal system that can provide access to this subdivision. The water system out on 3A is not of adequate capacity for connection. We could do a condition that the applicant would tie in if municipal ever became available, but it just doesn't exist at this site. The second one was with respect to the floor area in the basements being required to be 4 feet above the groundwater table if they were finished spaces for living or working space. That's not the case on Lot 2. Lot 2 would be an unfinished basement area, not used for living or working space. Mr. Brennan recommended that perimeter drainage be required, and I've noted here that the applicant is installing perimeter drainage on all of the lots within the subdivision, not just Lot 2. His comment number 4 was with regard to submission of a construction management plan, better detailing erosion control devices and sedimentation controls. Our plans did include a pretty detailed erosion control plan. It's 2 sheets, sheet 12 and 13 of the plan set. Again, where this project will be phased, phase 1 with the construction of the road, phase 2 is the lots. We could provide more detail, maybe at a pre-construction meeting, if that was, a condition that the board could approve, if the board approves the project. In the last 2, we had no comment on Mr. Brennan's recommendations that all conditions be included in section 1103 and 13.01F on the permit. And then the second one that we provide bills of lading, essentially, documenting where all the fill on the site comes from, its point of origin, and what it is. No problems with those recommendations whatsoever. In reviewing the special permit with respect to the inland wetlands district, again, it's just with respect to the house on Lot 2 that's within the district. But the stated purpose of the wetland district in section 13.01 of the bylaw here, there are 5 items. It's to preserve and protect the streams and other water courses within the town of Marshfield. I want to point out that we have very minimal impact to the wetlands at this site. We're not impacting the stream that runs through those wetlands because we're providing a culvert over it, an open bottom box culvert. There were no floodplains on this site. And again, the Marshfield Conservation Commission has approved all work with respect to the wetlands and water courses. Item number 2, the purpose of the district is to protect the health and safety of persons and property against the hazards of flooding. Again, there's no floodplains on this site. None of the homes are located in the wetland areas. When we walk to the site, there's pretty substantial topography there. You walk down an elevation from Route 3A, down to the wetland, which is at the lowest point, and then you walk uphill to the back of the site where the homes would be constructed. There's surface grading, or surface topography, if you will, over all of the lots that direct runoff toward the wetland area. None of the homes are in the low-lying areas. The homes are constructed significantly higher than the wetlands. Flooding would not be an issue on any of these lots. Third, the purpose of the district is to preserve and maintain the groundwater table for water supply purposes. I would state that this property is not in any of the town of Marshfield water supply protection zones. It's not in a well protection zone. It's not in a surface water protection zone. To the extent that this statement is in regards to on-site water resources and on-site wells, the project fully complies with DEP standards for both septic and on-site well standards. Item number 4 in the Inland Wetlands District is to protect the community against the detrimental use and development of lands adjoining watercourses. When I think of the community and what that statement means, I think it means the people of Marshfield, the public safety officials that might have to go out, or the utility personnel to access these lots. I think about the people driving on the road, and I think of the homeowners in the lots. None of them would be in danger because of the drainage system that's proposed within the roadway itself, which has undergone a peer review, again, by Mr. Brennan on behalf of the planning board, and his comments have been addressed with that. And the street itself has been designed in accordance with the subdivision rules and regulations. The homes are outside the flooding areas. And lastly, to preserve the watershed areas of the town of Marshfield, again, for the health, safety, and welfare of the public. This is not in a watershed area. This project preserves 50% of the land as open space. This is a fairly limited development of 10 homes on 18 acres in size. It maintains the drainage patterns, the rates, and the volumes of runoff as well. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you. Pat, do you have anything you'd like to offer, or?
Yeah, sure. Pat Brennan, I reviewed the project as Greg noted to the board. And I agree with Greg's responses to my comments. I think the proposed sketch that he provided showing that they can keep the 10 feet off the property line, I think that is something that the board should require. It's part of the bylaws, so I think you want to keep that away from that property line. There are conditions that are required for the inland wetland district, as Greg mentioned, was my last couple of comments, that any approval of those conditions should be included in any of your approvals, and I could certainly help you provide.
Yeah, could you write up the conditions for us?
Yeah, that's not a problem.
Thank you.
And then, like Greg said, I mean, my comment related to construction management and erosion sedimentation control is more about the phasing of the project. We just want to make sure that there are temporary erosion sedimentation controls in place during roadway construction, which, as Greg mentioned, is going to be the first phase. He does have detailed erosion sedimentation control plans in the plan set, but they're not really related to the phasing of the project. So it's something that I think the board may want to require additional detail on as the project progresses. Again, if the board approves it. Those are the main issues. So the board knows I did review this for the planning board. So I have reviewed all of the runoff, all stormwater calculations. I reviewed all that. I'm comfortable with those. I guess the only question is whether or not the public water supply for that lot would be required. When I read the bylaw, I thought because we were filling, right now this is a single lot, or two lots actually. As we were filling on the lots, it was development of lots, and we're filling, in order to construct the roadway out there, I was questioning whether or not they needed to be served by the public water supply. So that's a question that I had. I'm not sure if that's something that Attorney Galvin has any opinion on, but that was the main reason for me bringing that up. As Greg said, it's mainly only lot 2 where the house would be in that district, but you're constructing a roadway through that district to get out to serve those lots in the back behind us. So those are my comments for now. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you. Bob, do you have anything there?
Yeah. It's my opinion that the language of the bylaw says for the development of land within the inland wetland district, the following conditions shall apply. Number 1 is the lot shall be served by a public water system.
Okay.
It's not the development of lots, it's for the development of land. And I think that's a mandatory condition unless you vary it. I don't know enough about the water supply system in the area or close by, but, in many circumstances, someone has to make a connection to a public water supply if it's land in an inland wetland district. And I wasn't around when this bylaw was drafted or implemented, so I can't tell you the policy reasons, but I'm sure that the public water system was required to connect to land for a reason relating to the purpose of the district.
Well, that's something we can, hopefully we can dig into, Greg.
I certainly could, and I see where you're reading that, Attorney Galvin. The way I read Section B here, the definition of the district, it says a parcel of land with respect to which a building permit or use permit is sought shall not be subject to the provisions of Article 13, the entire thing, if and it has 3 requirements. 9 out of the 10 lots meet all 3 of those requirements, so I see that those 9 lots would be exempt. The roadway itself doesn't require a water service. What requires the water service is the construction of a house on a lot. And that parcel of land with respect to it, if the lot is partially outside the district, if the contiguous portion is greater than 80% of the lot, and if the building, the building is proposed outside of the district, that it wouldn't be required, was our interpretation of it, and that's how we move forward with it. The one house that's on Lot 2 that's partially inside of the district, I understand would have to comply with the requirements, and one of them is connection to the public water service. We're proposing it as a well. We could rotate the house 90 degrees. It wouldn't face the street like all the other houses and be traditional, but there's room to rotate it 90 degrees and get that house outside of the district. The reality is when you go out on the site and you look at the land and you look at how you come up in topography, where that house is sited is in no way a low-lying area. It's not an area that's prone to flooding. It's not a wetland area. It has good soil, despite the map here showing that that's a poorly drained soil location. We have passing perk tests. We have 4 passing perk tests witnessed by the Board of Health, 2 in the front yard and 2 in the backyard of that lot. So it seemed appropriate to have the house face the street as you traditionally would. If that becomes a sticking point for connection of the water system, we could get that house outside the district.
Okay.
It would look a little funky, but we could.
All right.
The problem is the water line that's out on Main Street. You'd have to install a new water line from this site up to the Highland Street intersection going down a state highway, and it just becomes cost prohibitive for a development of this size. So that's why we've proposed wells at this site.
Okay.
So,
What do you think of that, Bob?
I don't know, I'm just reading the words here, and it says the development of land.
Yeah.
And you've got a roadway going in there, you've got one house in there. It's not exempt,
All right.
in my opinion.
So we'll have to take, I don't believe we're deciding this tonight. We got some
The
stuff
only
to
way
work
around this, in my opinion, is they'd have to seek a variance.
Is a variance
A variance.
for the one house or all 10?
For the development of land in the inland wetlands district.
Okay. Well, is that something you want to submit for? Oh, you want to take some time to review this and come back?
I think I'm gonna have to take some time and review that. and come
Okay.
back.
Sure.
I mean, I was gonna recommend that you continue it anyways, so
Yeah.
Pat Brennan would give you his condition.
Right, we need conditions from him.
I don't think you wanna close it, because if Greg
No.
wants to apply for the variance, he's got some arguments here that, you don't typically see. He's
Right.
already kinda highlighted some of the topographic and soil condition issues, and, perhaps he can make an argument that,
For a variance if needed.
yeah, I mean,
All right.
I don't
so why don't-
judge anything, but, that,
So Nancy, when's the next meeting?
February 25th?
February 25th. You want to shoot
probably,
for that?
if he wants to apply for the variance, though, you're gonna need a couple of weeks.
Do you want to
Oh,
apply
yeah,
for the
they-
variance?
I would
So it'd probably be the
need it
first March
tomorrow,
meeting?
So tomorrow.
Can you get
for
it
the-
on, advertised?
Yeah, if I have everything tomorrow.
Is that something you
Does
can
that
do?
give you enough
I can-
time to consider it, Greg?
I'll get you something tomorrow, Nancy.
Okay.
Always, yeah.
So which March?
So that would be for March 11th.
March 11th.
March 11th.
Do we need any extension for time yet, Bob, or no?
No.
The 100 days, okay.
Your public hearing is still open,
Oh, okay.
and you've opened your public hearing within 65 days, so you're okay.
All right. All right, so I'm going to move that we extend 2502 Celebrity Realty LLC off Main Street to March 11th, 2025. Do I have a second?
Larry Keane, second.
All in favor?
Larry Keane, aye.
Brian Murphy, aye.
Jean Lee, aye.
Mac Brothers, aye.
Heidi Kobe, aye.
Rubens, yeah.
Brian Sullivan, aye.
All right, thank you.
Great, thank you very much.
So now I'm gonna move that we, move 2479 Gene and William Cook, 33 13th Road. Why don't we move them to
25th?
25th of February? Do I have a second?
Larry Keane, second.
All in favor?
Larry Keane, aye.
Brian Murphy, aye.
Jean Lee, aye.
Back Brothers, aye.
There you go, yeah.
Brian Sullivan, aye.
Thank you. All right, so now we have Bridle Crossing update. Let me get Ed Pesci's thing over here.
I don't know where it is.
I know I saw it.
I know, I thought I saw it.
I had one here. Oh, here it is. I have one here. All right. All right, so I'm just gonna update what's going on the Bridle Crossing project. Construction update. I'm just gonna read this, though it's lengthy. The sealant number one, the sealant applicant team began work on the site this fall by setting up and installing the required silt fencing, turtle barrier, and conducting a turtle sweep by their consultant, John Zimmer. In December 2024, site preparation began with the removal of trash, debris, old boats, trailers, and some construction debris, along with the clearing of most of the trees in the project location. This site work was also intended to prepare for the Town of Marshfield project for beach nourishment, in which the town selected soil specialist took soil samples at the site and determined that the sandy soils at this location were acceptable for beach nourishment specification. The applicant team was working under the assumption that the previous permits received for this site from both MIPA and the draft permit from National Heritage Endangered Species Program, NHESP, were still valid, and they had filled an updated MIPA and NHESP application and would allow for them to start work. The applicant's consultants advised them that this was winter work, was the best time of year to perform the soils of excavation while the species of concern were dormant, and that the excavation areas were on the exact locations in the previous permit indicated. In December, it was determined that both MIPA and NHESP permits were not up to date, and the new application to MIPA would need to be filed. Grady Consulting filed the new environmental notification from ENF and MIPA, which also included the updated NHESP application scope of work. The sealant applicant team was asked to stop all work by the building inspector on approximately January 23rd, 2025, until the new MIPA certificate is issued, and the new NHESP permit, a conservation and management permit, is received, and all work has stopped. A pre-construction meeting was held on the site on February 7th, 2025, with the applicant's team and various town departments to review the various items such as working hours, truck signage, and the construction of the safety fencing and existing bridle path area to protect the pedestrians there. So you have that, right, Andrew? So now the ground modeling update. The intent of this new groundwater modeling effort is essentially to complete the groundwater modeling that was performed through the DPW office and their consultant. Environmental Partners, EP, during the ZBA's comprehensive permit application review of this project in the spring of 2024. During the initial modeling effort, the conceptual groundwater model was developed using several assumptions were made to save time, simplifications of variables such as groundwater flow, direction, and PFAS nitrate concentrations, and 6 months with no rainfall recharge. This generated a result that indicated a potential 5-year travel time to Ferry Street public water supply wells from the Bridle Crossing site. Possibility of the PFAS may be detected above the safe drinking water standard of 4 parts per trillion, PPT, from the domestic wastewater emitting from the 88-bedroom project site. This course caused some concern on the part of the general public, but the analysis did not show any similar simulations for the existing septic systems from the neighborhoods that were actually closer and larger to the Bridle Crossing project site. It was determined that the initial analysis was more of a screening level effort, and that it did not assume the intake and dilution of effects of pumping clean water from all other directions, nor any attenuation of dilution of PFAS from the source area of Bridle Crossing. In discussing this with EP's modeling consultant, Mark Kaufman, now with QHS Consulting, the ZBA has requested an additional analysis in order to determine the result and effects of the wastewater from existing residential neighborhoods that are closer to Ferry Street well and larger, more bedrooms, and run a similar groundwater modeling effort with the same groundwater model used before. These two other neighborhoods are shown on the blue polygons on the attached sketch, site sketch of the Littles Creek Aquifer area, and accompanying table, the Marsh Hawk East and Pines West neighborhoods. The new modeling effort will be used in conjunction with the DPW work together to identification of additional groundwater modeling wells, locations to help monitor the project to the public water supply. The initial new modeling results are expected to be available in early March 2025. So if you just put up, yeah, those are the areas we're going to study. And if you could go to the drawing. So basically the green indicates the distance to the wells equal to the distance to the front of the project. The blue area to the right and the blue area to the left are the areas we want to run the model on, that we ran the model on the subject property. So we will have that information hopefully we're working with the Board of Public Works and the Select Board. We should have that by the end of March. The beginning of March, so we can discuss it again. Any questions from the board?
Nope.
Any question? What's that? Any questions from the audience?
William Vitez, 325 Grove Street.
Sorry, what was your name?
William Vitez.
Okay.
325 Grove Street. I guess I have 2 questions, really. I think one pertaining to this, does this mean that all work is halted until these new studies are completed? And why were these studies not done?
These studies were
previously?
not completed. They were asked for, and I was told we were going to get them in the initial study. They ran out of time to complete the study, so they only studied the subject property. So I was told in last year that they would finish this once they were done in August. But since August till now, we've been going back and forth about how it was going to be done and who was going to fund the end of the study.
And then my second one is with respect to the comprehensive permit that was granted, like there's a number of conditions in there that would seem to indicate that in missing these permits that are outdated.
Which are you talking about?
The one from July of 2024, the ZBA comprehensive permit that was granted. There's a number of conditions in there that were
What are the
that are
conditions?
preconditioned.
Right, but so what conditions are you
Like,
talking about?
the meeting referenced here that took place on February 7th, like, shouldn't that have happened before anything happened?
It should have,
on
but
the property?
they call the meeting, not the town.
And that's within,
So that meeting's been done.
and the deposits and things that have to take place before.
The what?
There's like a $7,500 deposit that takes place, like all that stuff was done. Like, I think there's some concern, again, from the community that some of these conditions were not met. Especially now hearing.
If you can put in writing what you believe is missing.
Okay.
You can send that to Nancy.
Okay.
And we'll get it answered for you.
Okay. Definitely do that. All right. Sounds good.
Is that all?
Yeah.
All right, thank you. All right, so now we have change to March 25, 2025 meeting.
Brian,
Oh.
there's someone that has a question. Michelle Shane has her hand up.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see her. Go ahead, name and address for the record.
It's Michelle Donnelly Shane, 356 Ferry Street.
Go ahead.
My question is the MEPA review and the NHESP permit that you were referencing, is this regarding the soccer fields from 16 years ago?
Those are the permits that, as I stated in there, they currently have, and they are adjusting whatever has to be adjusted on them, as far as I understand.
Okay, so they thought that the permits from the soccer fields from 16 years ago would be okay for now?
Yeah, those
Is
are
that
the,
correct?
those are the same permits that they're, I believe they are amending.
Okay, all right, great, thank you very much.
Is that it?
That's it, yeah.
Okay, thank you. All right, so now we have the discussion to change on March 25th, 2025 meeting. So what's going on with the town meeting?
Select board needs to have the changes that night for the joint meeting with the advisory board for town meeting. So they want to know if we approve our meeting to the following night.
On Wednesday?
Isn't the select board and the advisory board were meeting?
They have a
Yes.
joint meeting,
Yeah.
joint meeting before the town meeting.
So do you guys want to do it on the 25th
That
of
would-
March?
That would be fine by me.
Anyone have a problem with it?
I think I'm good.
All right. I think that's fine, Nancy.
Just vote on it.
Oh, we'll vote on it.
Case.
Let's move the meeting from the 24th to the 25th. Is that what we're doing?
Yes.
No, 25th to
25th.
25th to 26th.
Oh, 25th to the 26th of 2025 meeting. Do I have a second?
Larry Keane, second.
All in favor?
Larry Keane, aye.
Brian Murphy, aye.
Jean Lee, aye.
Mac Brothers, aye.
Heidi Cohen.
Burr, Renzi, aye.
Brian Sullivan, aye.
Thank you. So, what, nothing else, right, Nancy? We're just at adjournment. Move to close this meeting tonight.
Larry
Second.
Keane, second.
All in favor?
Larry Keane, aye.
Brian Murphy, aye.
Jean Lee, aye.
Mac Brothers, aye.
Heidi Cohen.
Burr, Renzi, aye.
All right,
Brian
thank you.
Sullivan, aye.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good weekend.
Good night.
Thank you.
Guys.
4 days from now.